All right. Thanks to everyone who's attending. We're going to give it a couple minutes as more people start to filter in as we get closer to the start. But appreciate everybody taking some time today to sit down with myself and Kristen. I think it'll be a great discussion, and I know we have a lot of folks attending today, and looking forward to getting through everything. We're going to reserve some time towards the end for kind of specific questions, but as we do, feel free to chat questions directly out, and and we'll get to as many of those as we can. And in the instance that we can't, we've got to record all of it, and we can circle up afterwards with folks to make sure that you get your specific questions answered. And as Kristen just sent out, let us know where you're dialing in from. We had over 100 or 150 folks register to attend. So I know we have representation from a lot of industries. I see some folks in the legal sector. I see some folks in the automotive supplier sector. I see a number of folks in consulting and professional services, staffing. We got people represented across, I think, maybe 15 or 20 different states. So it should be a really good discussion, and we've got a broad group of people that are coming in to listen. So thank you, everybody. All right. So to go ahead and kick things off, thank you, everybody, again for attending. I'm Alex Lassiter. I'm the CEO and founder of Greenplaces. We're an all-in-one sustainability software, and I'm very excited today to be sitting down with Kristen Siemen, just up until recently the Chief Sustainability Officer of General Motors. Today, we're going to kind of cover three things as far as our agenda. The first thing we're going to be doing is just kind of generally talking about the state of supplier sustainability requirements. Essentially, why are we even here in talking about this? How has this evolved over the last 5 or 10 years, and where do we sort of expect things to go over the next 5 to 10 from here? We're going to spend the bulk of the time, again, having a fireside chat with Kristen. Very excited to get her some time here to speak. She's super smart and has an incredible amount of exposure into this industry and direct experience. And I think it's going to be a really great discussion. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to reserve some time towards the end for Q&A. All you need to do is to just submit your questions into Zoom, and we'll collect those and answer those as we go. And again, for those who didn't hear earlier, if we don't get into everyone's questions, we will make sure that those get answered, and we'll be reaching out to you afterwards as well. So again, I've just introduced myself. I'm the founder and CEO of Greenplaces, but many of us are here to hear Kristen talk. So wanted to introduce you, Kristen. Welcome, and thank you for joining today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
All right. So one of the things we like to do on these is to kind of kick things off with a poll. So the question that we have here today is, will you be subject to reporting your carbon emissions to a client and or investor in the next year? So we want to get a sense if folks are currently running into this today, and it'll help us kind of understand, one, a little bit about where everybody is in their journey, and two, how to kind of tailor things to go from here. So if you can fill out the poll here, we will start to collect responses over the course of the next 15-20 minutes. And we'll go from there. And it looks like we're already starting to get a number of responses in. It looks like currently over 60% of the folks attending today are currently reporting carbon emissions to a client and investor. So that's really interesting. And we'll see more of those things come in over the course of the next 10 to 15 minutes. So thank you. Okay. So the first thing we wanted to do today was to set the stage a little bit and talk about why supplier sustainability matters now more than ever. As many of you know, the state of regulation and climate regulation in particular has really evolved quickly over the last 5 to 6 years. We've got reporting requirements that are centering around CSRD in the European Union. The UK has its own requirements. The SEC has proposed, and with the new administration, we don't know how that's going to turn. But California has jumped the gun and has begun its own or its own sustainability reporting requirements, which kicks in January for certain companies, and then in the following year for others. Canada has its own, Australia has its own, and then many municipalities. We've seen reporting requirements come down in New York. There are some regulations currently working its way through the state of Minnesota, and this continues to evolve. But what's really interesting, and this is where we see a lot of the work that we do, if we go to the next slide here, these regulations are pulling in the world's largest companies to start to get serious about sustainability and climate reporting. So for many of us in the middle market and as suppliers of the Fortune 500, we may not be large enough to be subject to some of these legislation and regulatory efforts, but the clients that we serve are. So what's happening is the largest businesses in the world are being faced with regulation in one or multiple different markets. And to be able to meet that regulation, they are setting their own standards and their own goals around sustainability and carbon reductions, and they're pushing those requirements down to their suppliers. And as you'll see in the next slide here, now that over 50% or nearly 50% of the Fortune 500 has a net zero target, if you add in the fact that nearly 90% of many of these businesses' environmental footprint is actually the footprint of its suppliers. So for a company like General Motors or a company like AstraZeneca or Microsoft, a significant portion of their carbon emissions is not in scope 1 or scope 2, meaning it's not something that's operationally and directly involved with what they do. It's actually the added up emissions of all of their suppliers. So the only way that these large companies are going to be able to meet the requirements that they have to reduce carbon emissions is to engage all of their suppliers in this journey, and to actually encourage and in many cases mandate that suppliers meet those requirements too. In other words, there's absolutely no way that a company like General Motors can reach net zero without General Motors' supply chain joining in that to be able to meet net zero as well. And so what that's done is it's set the stage to make sustainability a requirement for serving the world's largest businesses. And it doesn't matter if you're a professional service, a law firm, it doesn't matter if you manufacture a part. If you are a part of that supply chain and service chain, you are going to be on the hook to be able to help these businesses get there. And that sort of sets us up to where we are today. So if you go to the next slide here, just as a quick kind of piece as who we are and why we're talking about this, I started Greenplaces 3.5 years ago. And at the time, this is when most of these large companies were starting to put a stake in the ground and saying, we are going to take climate seriously. We are going to set a 2050 or a 2030 target to reduce emissions. And at the time, all of the attention was really devoted to these really large companies making these proclamations. What we realized was the only way for these businesses to hit their goals is for all of their suppliers to meet the goals. And that made us take a big step back to say, wow, General Motors is going to have somebody like Kristen in place and a team of people and executives with budget to really, really focus on this issue. But how is everyone else going to be able to meet these demands? Because sustainability is hard, it's complex, it takes a lot of expertise, it's evolving, and in many ways, it's a very, very difficult and time-consuming challenge for the everyday business. And so we started Greenplaces to be able to help suppliers of the Fortune 500 be able to meet these demands and be able to add sustainability into what they do. And so we think about Greenplaces as like a chief sustainability officer in a box. And functionally, what we're going to do is we're going to help businesses with number one, identifying what are the requirements that they need to meet. So for many of you, you might report to one or two or 20 different businesses, and each one of those companies might have a slightly different requirement when it comes to reporting for sustainability. Some might want you to report to CDP. Some might want you just to deliver a carbon footprint. Some might want you to set a science-based target. And so what Greenplaces can help businesses do is to understand what each one of those requirements are and break it down into a very simple data collection stream. So we could say, in order to meet the requirements of these 10 companies, we need access to these pieces of information, and we help businesses collect that data. Then we take sustainability experts on our team who are familiar and understand your industry to actually help your business both report their carbon footprint, set those targets, meet these requirements. And then we have a suite of other solutions that really helps you from everything from identifying ESG policy gaps with template libraries, shareable and secure web pages that can tell the story to your biggest and most important customers of what you're doing, and strategies to be able to help your business get wherever you need to go, no matter where you're starting from. And so we're really excited because one of the things that we get to do is to be at this center point between the world's largest businesses and the goals that they have around climate, and then all of their suppliers who are trying to figure out the best ways to do it. And one of the things that we're announcing as part of this webinar is Greenplaces' new supplier sustainability database. And what this is an effort that we've undertaken over the last 3 years to start to pull in thousands of businesses' supplier requirements as they pertain to sustainability. So all of the requirements that an Adobe or a 3M or an AstraZeneca or a General Motors might have, and we pull those requirements into a searchable database. And then we scan those documents to be able to lay out specifically what are the things that you need to do, what are the commonalities between different suppliers, so you're not having to report to 10 different people in 10 different ways, trying to consolidate it for businesses so they have one central place to get the information that they need to understand exactly what they need to do, and to hopefully help those businesses be able to meet these requirements both faster, but also with a lot less headache. So we're putting a QR code up here, and we'll share more of this later. But if folks want to be able to have access to the supplier hub, we've officially launched it this morning, but it is invite only at this point. So scan this and we'll get some information from you, and we can give you access to the database. And once you're in, we're obviously interested in feedback and things that we can do to be able to help make this easier for you. So let's go ahead and get into the fireside chat, because that's one of the reasons why I think everybody is here. And so to kick things off, Kristen, your journey at General Motors, it has started a long time ago in product development. You've evolved into leading sustainability. How did your background, I'm curious, as an engineer, shape your approach to sustainability, and particularly when it came to aligning like big goals like carbon neutrality with the practical realities of this is just a really complicated process?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Alex. So as you said, I was with General Motors for 30 years, and 27 of those were spent in product development. So I'm an engineer by degree. I have my bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering. And engineers are trained to solve problems. So, I often get asked the question of how I moved from product development to sustainability, and the simple answer, it was literally a phone call. My first question when I got the phone call was, why me? That I didn't have a background in sustainability. And at the time, things were just getting started. But my role I had right before this was actually working with my predecessor. I had responsibility what we called our global energy strategy team. So we were working on, from a product side, certification and compliance, GHG regulations, fuel economy standards, I had the Aero Development Lab, et cetera. So I really was closely working with my predecessor on setting our big goals around, GM's big goals around carbon neutrality. And the reality is, once I got into the role, I really found having that network and understanding of the business turned out to be a great advantage. A lot of times in sustainability, the sustainability core group really isn't doing the work that needs to be done to decarbonize the business. Certainly they're doing reporting, they're setting standards, setting goals, and they're pulling people together. But the real core work needs to happen within the functional units themselves. And so it was a great way to really translate what we needed to do from a sustainability standpoint into the various teams and functions. I had spent time in my career working in validation and test. And so I had a great understanding of what it took to certify a new material. As we looked at new sustainable materials at General Motors, that's not something that you can do overnight. You got to make sure that it's going to meet all of the regulations, all of the validation requirements, and last from a life cycle standpoint. And having that technical background really enabled me to bring some level of credibility to the various teams, whether it was our creative design, our design release engineers, or even in our facilities around what we needed to do from energy savings or waste savings. So it was what I thought was going to be a big hurdle turned out. Obviously, I had a lot to learn from a sustainability standpoint, but it really was great to have that experience within the business and be able to understand what it took to make the changes we needed.
Absolutely. And, GM's carbon neutrality goals and plans for, an all electric fleet by 2035 are ambitious, I think, to say the least. What were some of the biggest challenges in aligning these goals across the organization and supply chain? And how did these initiatives like the Supplier Sustainability Council and the Supplier Pledge help these smaller and mid-sized suppliers actually get on board?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of kicked it off here. GM's a little bit unique in some ways, is that the biggest part of our carbon footprint is, like a lot of companies, the customer usage of the product. In our case, obviously the vehicle. And so about 70% of GM's footprint was the customer usage or the emissions from vehicle usage. So clearly making the transition to an all-electric future was the most important thing to do. But the next biggest chunk was our supply base, and about 19% last year we reported. And so in order to, frankly, even to make the change to all electric, it's not something that we could do on our own at General Motors. And so we really needed to engage suppliers along the way. And one of the ways that was done at GM was through a supplier sustainability council. So we had a supplier council that the purchasing and supply chain team worked very closely with on various topics and challenges. And we replicated that with sustainability. And so we worked with them on setting up the goals that we wanted our suppliers to meet. And you mentioned the supplier pledge. So General Motors issued a ESG supplier pledge where we asked suppliers, mainly tier ones, to sign on to their own commitments around carbon neutral, and then also a minimum score on EcoVadis. And the reason with that is really, it wasn't something, the transparency and importance of what we do. And if you look at even some of the social aspects around human rights or labor practices, it's very difficult for a big company like GM to get down deep into their supply chain. As much as, the desire is there and the want is there, it's difficult to get down to, tier 3, tier 4s. And so by engaging the tier 1 suppliers, we found that it became a snowball effect, Now, we had tier ones that were then working with their own supply base to create the same type of commitments. And it really started to take hold and was really driving a lot of what we wanted to accomplish. This space, probably more than any, is all about collaboration. And another area that we worked really heavily on was around renewable energy. And so GM had set some pretty lofty goals around their own renewable energy goals. In fact, overachieved that in the US by 25 years, and will be 100% renewable in the US next year. But to really, again, have an impact broader, GM partnered with a number of other OEMs and companies, including, supplier Magna, Ford, Honda, and then worked with Trio to develop a program where suppliers could purchase renewable energy and again have a bigger impact on their scope 2 emissions. But that's difficult for a supplier to often do on their own. These projects are large, they're huge investments, and depending on the size of the supplier, particularly maybe some of the smaller ones, would really enable them to participate. And so collaborations and programs that can really pull people together, I think, are what's super important in this space.
And I think the point that you made there of kind of breaking these very big things down into smaller ones that people can do, I think really helps, I think, businesses meet you where you need them to be. So I think it's just really impressive how, obviously y'all had to build this whole thing for yourselves, but particularly with something like renewable energy, you're not just telling suppliers, I need you to do this. You're also giving them a path to be able to get there. And I think that's just a really important distinction. And it's a relationship of suppliers where you're helping each other be able to get to those mutually beneficial goals. When we talk to a lot of businesses and just kind of out in the market, for a lot of people, sustainability sometimes can feel like this compliance exercise, but what you've described is different. You're describing a way to build, number one, long-term business resilience and better relationships with the suppliers that you have. What other approaches have you worked, have worked well for you to get stakeholders to go beyond this like check the box compliance and to view sustainability as a practical strategy to strengthen the relationship with General Motors and really set them up for future growth?
Yeah, great question. Sustainability, and certainly I learned, and other CSOs I'm sure feel it as well. It's this giant umbrella that it seems everything is under. You have everything from traditional environmental work to, we talked a little bit about the social aspects and human rights and labor practices and product safety and, health and safety in the company, all the way into, from a compliance, a governance standpoint. I used to call it a little g. It wasn't governance of the whole company, but certainly governance around sustainability. And so I think that the challenge people have is, how do you take that on? And capital is always an issue, funding is always an issue, resources are always an issue. And I would try and tell people, I said, I'm not asking you to do anything your parents didn't teach you, right? It's turn off the lights, quit running the water, and shut the door. You're letting all the air out of the house. And if you really take a step back and look at it from the standpoint that this is about, I would describe sustainability at the core about resilience, and it's about making the company resilient to all of these outside factors that could impact it, as well as ensuring, that you're leaving things in a better state than what they were. And so when we would work with suppliers, or I think when suppliers think about it, I think the best thing to think and start with is this is about efficiency. These are, at the core, these are things that make the company stronger, are good financially. They create value. In many cases, they create a structure and a rigor within the business that can be translated into many other functions. the more efficient you are, the more quality product you're building. And you can walk into, it's kind of like the old days of walking into a facility and looking at, did they 5S it, right? Is it clean?
Yeah.
Is it organized, right? And you can argue, well, why is that important? Well, it's important because it translates into everything else you do. And,
Mhm.
and I think sustainability is very much just like that. It really is about understanding your business, being able to measure, being able to track, and then ultimately reduce and have an impact.
I really like the connection there between sustainability and resilience because, you know, over the last 10 years and certainly in the next 10 or 20 as artificial intelligence and everything else starts to work its way, into the business landscape, um, businesses, especially large ones, have to be sure that the suppliers that they work with are going to be able to be there for 10, 20, 30 years and in that be able to adjust for market conditions, political turmoil, resource constraints, whatever it might be in the supply chain that ultimately if they're looking at this stuff now, what I'm hearing is it means that they're going to be more valuable to the business because you can depend on them and they're ready. They're ready and looking at things. And that's a really, I think, unique take on this because like so many people sort of view this as like it's dogmatic, like, you know, we care about the climate, so you need to care about the climate. It's like, well, yes, but like what we're talking about here is to get your head up and looking at these places. And General Motors as a company has got to be thinking about 100 years ahead, not 10 years and not 5 years. So getting those suppliers to be able to have that visibility can really strengthen that and help you succeed and also help them succeed.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it really is about being prepared and understanding, all of these impacts that can have. And we've all lived with supply chain issues over the past 5 years and understood the issue there. So it's more important than ever that we're aligned and frankly collaborating, right? This is a space where it's not about competition. It's
Yeah.
about how we work together and share ideas and best practices and can all learn from each other.
We had Noel Kinder, who was the head of sustainability at Nike on, I think it was 3 or 4 months ago. And that's similar to what he talked about too. He said, we've been doing this for 20 years and we don't do this just because it's it's the zeitgeist of the day to talk about it. He said,
Right.
we do this because this is important because if somebody is doing something in our supply chain that's not aligning with the core values of our business, but the values of our customers, people will know about it. And that is a huge risk to us. And we need to understand it. And we want our suppliers to understand it because the monsters that are lurking in their supply chain is the inherited risk, of the broader company. And we live in this world where the information can be available, so we go out and get it, and it makes a ton of sense. Um,
Absolutely.
so, on that same note, transparency and data are critical to sustainability, and oftentimes the two things that are the hardest to get. So verifying accuracy and ensuring compliance can be, I think, super tricky. So, what are the best practices that you've seen, whether implemented at GM or beyond, to really build trust in your supplier reporting, and more importantly, for the folks that are attending? How can mid-market suppliers demonstrate that credibility to a company like General Motors?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, measuring, tracking, and reporting is probably the one of the biggest headaches for, sustainability teams, I think, across all industries, and it's getting more complex. As you mentioned at the beginning, with all of the different regulations that are coming out. My ultimate dream would be that we would all agree on one, because I often said every minute that the team spends reporting, they're not doing. And however, the data and the transparency is absolutely critical. You don't, and particularly again as an engineer, I love data, and it's really difficult to know if you're getting better, if you're not measuring. And getting that information from suppliers is extremely important. And again, it translates into how they operate the rest of their business as well. And so it's not just about carbon reduction. or how much renewable, but that really gets down into efficiency. How efficient do they run their operations? Obviously cost savings is a constant battle between a large company and their suppliers. Most of what we're talking about, at least at the core, is cost savings. Certainly done in the right way with the most ethical behavior and all of the social aspects behind it. But these efficiency things really impact the bottom line for both companies as well. And so being able to integrate that information, in what we're doing from CO2 emission reduction, et cetera, into supplier evaluations and being able to understand what their long-term strategies are is super important. It was one of the reasons that at GM we required them to report an EcoVadis, and we asked for CDP data and providing tools available for them to be able to do that. It's the only way you can understand where you're at and what you need to focus on is by measuring and tracking and benchmarking. And so, the more rigor that suppliers can put into that, the more transparency they can provide. Is important to everyone. And again, it's important that we keep talking to commonize on those things as well. So that I loved your supplier data because it's a challenge in so many spaces. So for Greenplaces to be able to provide that to others is super valuable.
Yeah, I think in my head a little bit about it like when you imagine trying to pay taxes and not knowing which states and jurisdictions you owed taxes and not knowing the commonalities of all of those things. Number one is you're not going to do it right. And if you did, you're going to be so inefficient that you're going to spend months and months and months doing it. So trying to consolidate those things into one place can just hopefully really help because there are similarities. There's commonality between what General Motors wants and maybe what a Microsoft wants and maybe what a Nike wants. That doesn't mean that it's completely the same, but there are some overlapping pieces which should reduce some of the burden, I think, for businesses. But what I'm also hearing is part of the value here for General Motors and for the suppliers is it creates a framework for businesses to know what readiness looks like, because presumably these are things that General Motors is already thinking about for themselves. And so by bringing it out to the suppliers, it's a way to, as you mentioned, understand how ready and resilient are these businesses based on what could happen. And it's funny, we've been looking into financial advisory and reporting now for 100 years and standardizing that process. It helps us really understand what a business has done in the past. But how do you think about what a business will do in the future depending on different scenarios? And this data can help to get into the mindset of how leaders make decisions and how they make choices and trade-offs. And are they thinking about the right things? And I didn't think about it until now, but it is a really helpful way to sort of readiness and make your own supply chain more resilient across, many, many different risk scenarios in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, for suppliers that are starting out today, and as our poll indicates, there's it looks like now we're nearing about 70% of folks on the call are currently reporting. It's easy to feel overwhelmed for anybody in this room that has even opened a CDP document. It's hundreds and hundreds of questions, and they're not easy. And most of us don't have it just laying out there. So it's easy to feel overwhelmed. What are the steps that you recommend businesses take? So for the folks that are here today, what are they? Where do they start? How should they think about ESG frameworks or how to kind of begin this process and what to take home to their boards and teams after this call?
Yeah, great question. And I would often talk with even my internal team at GM, we would see this big mountain in front of us and our team members didn't know how to get to the top and they would struggle then to get started, and the biggest thing I would say is just start, start small, start with a project, start understanding, it's kind of you have to start measuring in order to really understand where you're at. Set a goal, even if the goal is, you know, 20 years out. The renewable energy goal at GM is a great example. Originally, it was set for 2050. Well, once the team got moving and understanding where we were and what we needed to get to, they were able to accomplish it significantly earlier. And I think that happens a lot of times is once you really get started, you realize you can move faster and further than you ever thought you could. So, maybe the goal is a small one, maybe it's a waste goal, maybe it's an energy efficiency, something that you know how to measure today. And once you get people moving and, I would say put points on the board, you start to get inspired to do more and helping people even understand how their role impacts, what you're trying to do. I think the frameworks, whether it's, setting a science-based target and working with SBTI or using, EcoVadis, even, reporting on CDP, all of those things, pick something and start doing it. And then you'll start to understand where your challenges are, where your hurdles are. And honestly, I know you'll be able to show progress because if you're not measuring it today, if you're not looking at it, a lot of times you don't even know where it's just like the waste we've talked about for years. Once you start identifying it and working to eliminate it, it really shows progress. And there's so many opportunities in this space, everything from, I say kind of the stuff right in front of you is energy, water, waste. But then you start getting into, new technologies, new materials, new ways of engineering a product. How do you engineer the product so that, the end of life is thought about up front? And all of those things just start to weave into your culture, into your business. I liken it a lot to safety and quality. If you can get your company to think about sustainability like you think about safety and quality, you'll have accomplished most of the battle. And you don't get to pick one. It's like I tell my kids, because you have 5 classes, you don't get to pick one that you get a lower grade in. You got to do all of them, and it's a little bit the same thing here. But once you start doing it and having techniques and best practices that you implement, it really makes it it makes it much easier, and I think you'll accomplish more than you ever thought you could.
What's so interesting about this is, as I'm hearing this from you, it makes me think like reading these requirements is like a window into understanding what's important for a company like General Motors as they think in the next 10 to 20 years as a supplier. So if I'm a company that, provides a part, a service, distribution chain, whatever it might be for GM, this is a unique window into the criteria for the decision-making and the goals that GM has and how GM views resiliency. So understanding why these questions are asked can help you almost build a blueprint for innovation and a blueprint for growing your business into these accounts. Because if you can win on these things, it allows you to do it. I'm curious, like when you send out reporting requests to suppliers, you don't get 100% back. I'm curious if you can share, but like, because a lot of people we talk to, where they get stressed is they say, well, what if I report and I look bad? And what we always say is reporting doesn't ever look bad. Like not reporting is what looks bad. Reporting just says, hey, I'm at least looking at it and I'm starting to think through things. But I'm just curious, like on an offhand, like candidly, what is that when you send out a survey and a supplier just doesn't respond, and let's say they're an important one, what is the conversations like, or at least the thought in your head? Is it, why on earth wouldn't they? I mean, like, how do you sort of weight the no response versus a response that's not, perfect?
Yeah, I mean, like at GM, and I'm sure many other companies have similar practices. Our suppliers were our partners, and so as we set goals, we were looking for our suppliers to be aligned with us. So if a supplier doesn't support or participate in a key objective for the company, it sends a pretty strong message. And that transparency is extremely important. Honestly, it's no different for a large company. Many companies, I know Microsoft, I think Amazon had the same issue. Our numbers certainly in some of the categories at General Motors were, not as aggressive of a growth as we had hoped for reductions, as EV market, conditions were different, et cetera. But stating that you maybe either went backwards or and explaining the why, Amazon and Microsoft were growth businesses, and so their carbon footprint was growing, but maybe their efficiency was better. And so being transparent and explaining that means you understand where your challenges are, where the hurdles are, and where you need to go. And for a supplier, again, it's just like your quality data, right? If you understand it and you're working on it. Now, if you understand it and you're completely ignoring it and not doing anything about it and have no plans, that's a different discussion. But if you've got hurdles in the next 5 years and the next 10 years, you can really accelerate things, but you have a plan to do that. That's a great conversation to have. Sustainability at General Motors was one of our key supplier awards. And so, there's only a handful of those that are given out. And I think that shows how important it was to us at GM. And I think it, translates to many other businesses. And if you look at across industries, companies have made commitments and they're looking for their, for their supply base to be aligned with those commitments as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We're gonna pivot to some questions because I know I could talk to you for 2 more hours. So I'm going to pick some questions for folks that would like to. There's a little Q&A box. You can type in questions here. We've had some questions submitted to us already, and I'll start to work down those things. Again, if we don't get to your question live, I promise you we will get to your question, and we'll send it out after the webinar. One question, we've had a lot of interest in this so far of understanding how to verify and ensure supplier compliance with sustainability standards. One of the registrants asked, how do you verify that a supplier has correctly stated their carbon emissions? Can you elaborate more on how companies can address this challenge while maintaining trust and accountability?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the importance of the standardized frameworks really come in. And, there's new tools that are coming out, all the time, or new frameworks. But I think, as you said, with, a company like Greenplaces that's offering that information on what to report on and what the frameworks include, that transparency in reporting to one of those really shows that you understand and you're committed, whether it be EcoVadis or CDP. And plus then it allows for some benchmarking and validation, as those frameworks or organizations do the assessments as well, right? I mean, we can look at where suppliers are on a rating, just like we look at our own ratings. And I think it goes beyond just that, though, too. It still really is the collaboration and having the conversation over what the companies are looking for. Clearly, the more that we can do to make the data easily transferable and understandable is going to be critical. And so I would encourage companies to pick a framework, report on it, learn, be transparent, and then make the next steps and adjustments from there.
Mm-hmm. Makes total sense. So we have a couple questions that are centering around this question of justifying the investment. So one registrant had asked, how can a supplier, mid-market supplier, make the business case internally for investing into sustainability reporting and reductions, including specialty headcount? Another had mentioned with the state of the economy and everything else going on, how hard everything is. While the core of this can be cost savings, but it takes several years, CFOs are pushing back. We see some of smaller vendors trying to figure out how to prioritize. How do you justify the cost of this? How do you take this to a CFO and say, this is what we need, and here's what we ought to be doing amidst all of the other things that suppliers struggle with?
Yeah, I mean, look, the same challenges exist in large companies around capital investment, resources, project, operational cost, et cetera. Um, I think the challenge or the uniqueness about this space that is not done enough is the discussion or the evaluation of the risk of not acting. And so, you know, energy reductions or energy efficiencies are great examples. In some cases, energy itself is electricity is higher now. Natural gas prices are really low. But if you start looking at what that looks like 5, 10 years down the road, the business case for some efficiency projects may be different, maybe a little bit longer return. But when you really look at what happens if you don't act and you don't understand today, even energy availability and the resiliency and those things are important. And so I think in this space, and pull on others, pull on collaborations. Again, if you really take a look at your business, there's many things I think you could do that start at a zero cost and become cost savings. When you start to build enough of those, and maybe you build something in that, okay, we're gonna start measuring how much we save on energy efficiency just in a facility, right? We're gonna go in, make sure people are doing shutdown procedures correctly. We're gonna turn off lights. We're gonna change things to low flow, nozzles on faucets, right? Things that cost very, very little money. And then you start measuring the savings. Maybe you split some of those savings to be able to then invest in the next project. It does take some creativity because these are often longer term, but they really do, at the end of the day, provide value. Many of the things that we prioritized when I was at GM were really about cost savings efforts. And again, the collaboration amongst suppliers and learning from each other, there's a lot of that information available to be shared.
Mm-hmm. And this is an addendum to that question, but for businesses that are trying to navigate all of the different reporting aspects to sustainability, be it diversity and more quantitative and technical work around emissions and environment, what are based on your experience with kind of a global supply chain, like what do you feel like are the most important areas to focus on? How would you sort of categorize things beyond just emissions, or how would you think about that in the context of emissions or diversity? Like how do you give people the balancing act there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and it's hard to say one's more important than the other. I think if you think about it from the standpoint of how do you make your company the most resilient and most competitive and most attractive, and what your risk areas are, then I think it helps you understand what to focus on. And so, while DEI may be seen as a softer thing, or even labor practices or human rights, but one of those that would be damaging to your company and would cause someone not to want to work with you, then it's a high risk. And so I think when you do things like materiality assessments and really understand what are the largest impacts to your business, you really can understand, and you can do those things internally without even a big formal process, just to understand what the leaders of your company in the various functions think are the highest risks, and then that helps you understand where to focus.
So basically, sitting down and asking all these questions internally, and then identifying which one of these are our
Yeah,
most problematic areas. We may find that that answer of which one to prioritize is different for every company. But if you take the view of
sure.
how Motors looking at it, it's going to say which one of these is going to be the biggest one that could hurt us, relative to where you are, and that's a good place to start to focus. Um,
Exactly.
we had a question come in that said, uh, what are the first steps to picking a framework? If we were going to start now, like, where would we start? And this particular person is a U.S. based high commodity business. If that's helpful for context.
Yeah, I mean, I would say pick a common one, and or use a tool like you just announced this morning that shows where the commonalities are. Um, I honestly don't think it matters which one. I think it's important to just start. Um, you know, do a quick analysis of maybe where the strengths are or where your competitors
Mm.
are, what they're using. You can quickly go out and look at companies that have been evaluated, either who has science-based target goals, or which is probably not where I would start because it's a long process to get goals. But CDP, EcoVadis, um, I, I think those will enable you to um, quickly understand quickly. As you mentioned, Alex, it's not quick,
Yeah.
but relatively understand where your company is at, and ask your biggest customers, what are they looking for?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I think to that person, anybody else kind of asking, I think uh, part of the reason that we built this supplier database, and we have a similar one that's based on regulations, is just to help people with that. So reach out to us. This isn't a sales pitch. This is free. If we can understand who are the businesses that you serve and a little bit more about you, how big you are, where you're based, what industry you're in, pretty quickly we can come back to you and say, here's all the people that you sell to that need this stuff. Here's the stuff that they need. And then you can use that to go look internally and say, are we in a good place or are we not? Do we have some real work to do? You might see it and say, none of the people we're selling to really need this at all. And, then monitor it going forward. But for a lot of businesses, particularly, I'm sure many on the call, you probably have a lot more businesses that you either currently work with or want to that are asking for this stuff. And so just getting a lay of the land of like what are the things that are most important to all of them can help you, I think, kind of prioritize where you begin. And that can predate choosing EcoVadis or CDP or any of these other alphabet soup things. Ultimately, it all gets to the same thing. There's just a bunch of questions most people want to know about your business, and understanding, how you're set up today to be able to respond to those things will help you in kind of any situation.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, and I would just reinforce the regulations are coming. And so even if you're not specifically impacted today, you will be. So the sooner that you can engage on in getting ready and at least start understanding where you're at and where your challenges are, the better.
yeah, I think that's a great point. A lot of folks that we talk to, I think, they look at they look at a bunch of things. They might look at the upcoming administration and say, well, is this going to make it go away? And it might for the SEC, but it's not for California or
Exactly.
Canada or the EU or Australia or the UK or anywhere else. And so for a company, if you're selling to the enterprise, those global companies are not only adherent to what happens domestically, in the federal government. Those businesses are getting hit everywhere. And so your need to do this stuff is stemming from many, many different places, which pretty much tells you three things. One is you can't run from it. It's here. It's inevitable. Two is it's going to continue to change and evolve and grow. So wherever we are today will probably be harder in the future. And then three, and this is the part that I think is the hardest, is because it's not unified, you're going to run into issues where everyone is speaking from a slightly different set of questions, which means it's going to feel more and more like tax season, I think, in the future, because it's just complicated because it is. And so the sooner you can start to get a sense of where you are today and just what your baseline strategy is for doing this, who meets about it, who talks about it, how often do we need to discuss it? Like those things can just really, really help you in the future because, and I'm curious, Kristen, on your side with General Motors, if a vendor doesn't do this or a supplier doesn't do this, by the time that it becomes an issue, I imagine it takes a while for this stuff to get through. I mean, I know how hard it is to
Yeah.
meet compliance things. What's the patience lever, in many cases for a company like General Motors, for a business who says, well, we haven't done it yet, but we're working on beginning, how do you sort of weigh that out?
Yeah, I mean, I would anticipate that, you know, many companies this is going to be a price of entry in the near future. It's no longer going to be a choice. It'll be a requirement. And so I think the quicker that you can prepare for that, the better. Might not happen this year, but it is going to happen. It's no different than any other data that a company is asking for, an understanding of your business. And so, yeah, I would anticipate that those requirements are going to come pretty quickly.
So one more question, and we've had lots of questions, so thank you very much. This question, he asked, you mentioned earlier, spend more time doing versus just kind of reporting the news, which makes sense. What's the best practice for like an OEM, to have the tools to track performance? Like, how do they need to be? What is the best practice for them to be able to do this stuff? Do they need a tool to track things? Like, do they need to be supplying information about leading indicators for what they're doing? Like, what is sort of if you were talking to somebody and said, look, if you're going to start, this is what I would say that you need to kind of think about doing today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely comes down to having picking a framework, having some type of internal, I mean, you may be starting with spreadsheets and, whatever data system you use internally, find a way to translate that in to data that can be easily discerned from, to outsiders. There's systems like M2030 out there that are pretty common in the automotive industry. I think understanding, as you said again, and I know we've mentioned it a couple of times, but what the companies are asking for, focus on the big ones. Focus on your energy use, and maybe it's just, even if you start at one plant or one facility, and you'll quickly be able to see what you know today, what you have access to, and what you're going to have to go get. There's a lot of companies out there that'll suggest and market tools and availability and resources and everything else. I think understanding what you need to provide is most important before you sign on to any of that.
Makes total sense. Well, thank you everybody for joining. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time. Again, thank you, Kristen, for taking the time to share. I thought that was super insightful. We will be sending more information. We'll respond to questions we didn't get to. If you have another question, feel free to reach out to us. If Greenplaces can help, we're a tool to help track this stuff. We're obviously experts to be able to help you navigate it. If you have any questions at all, we understand this stuff is really hard. So feel free to reach out, and we're happy to get back in touch with you. And you know, if we're the right solution for you, we're happy to help. If we're not the right solution for you, we know all the other solutions. We can help you find one. I know this is hard. It's a tough thing to do this anyway, to build these businesses. I get it. It's hard. And we want to be able to be here to help you in the best way that you can, so that you can continue to grow your own businesses and be successful in the next decade. So thank you, everybody. And big thank you to Kristen.
Thanks, Alex. It was great. I enjoyed the conversation.